a group of scientists build on the work started by biblical scholar and archaeologist Dr. Stephen Collins. They analyze the ruins at Tal El-Hammam, which he believes may be the actual location of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Archaeologists thought they were just digging up another ancient city. Instead, they found a scene of total destruction. Walls blown apart, pottery melted, human remains charred in an instant.
This is full of burned pottery. It's full of the fragments of human bones. The question is what evidence is there of this burning sulfur that rained down?
It looked less like history and more like the aftermath of a nuclear blast. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't an ordinary ruin. Could this be Sodom and Gomorrah, the cities the Bible says God burned with fire from the sky? We'll find that out today. The excavation of Tal El-Hammam. For years, archaeologists had been combing the Dead Sea region, chasing rumors of cities long lost to time. The Bible spoke of Sodom and Gomorrah as places so corrupt that fire rained from the heavens to wipe them away. Most scholars dismissed them as allegory, a dramatic moral lesson carved into scripture. But then came Tal El-Hammam, a sprawling site in Jordan's eastern Jordan Valley. At first glance, it looked like many other Bronze Age ruins: stone foundations, crumbled walls, pottery shards littering the soil. But as excavation teams dug deeper, something felt wrong. The city wasn't just ruined, it looked like it had been obliterated. Archaeologists uncovered walls blasted outward, as though some unimaginable force had struck them from above. Pottery wasn't merely broken, it had been melted. Imagine clay vessels baked in fire so hot that they dripped into glassy puddles. That kind of destruction doesn't come from your average house fire or even from an invading army. Even more unsettling were the human remains. In layer after layer of soil, charred bones told the story of lives that ended in an instant. It wasn't the slow burn of a long siege. It was sudden, violent, final. Teams brushed away ash, uncovering evidence of heat so intense it scorched stones black. They found bricks fused together, plaster turned to dust, and entire structures collapsed as though flattened by a massive shockwave. It looked eerily familiar to modern eyes, like the ruins left behind in Hiroshima or Nagasaki, except these ruins were nearly 4,000 years old. The more the archaeologists uncovered, the clearer it became. Tal El-Hammam had suffered a catastrophe unlike anything else in the region. Entire neighborhoods were gone in an instant. The destruction layer stretched across the site, thick with ash, shattered building material, and debris tossed around like toys. And then came the silence of the soil. Above the destruction layer, the city was empty. No rebuilding, no return. It was as if the survivors, if there were any at all, fled and never dared come back. Whatever happened here left scars so deep that the land itself seemed cursed. Word of the excavation spread quickly beyond academic circles. Reporters, historians, and theologians all asked the same question. Had the archaeologists stumbled onto the real Sodom? The parallels were unnerving. A once thriving city suddenly reduced to ash and ruin, abandoned for centuries, sitting right in the area the Bible described as the cities of the plain. For the researchers on site, the experience was less about scripture and more about shock. They were holding in their hands pieces of pottery that had literally bubbled in extreme heat. They were mapping walls blasted in directions that defied simple explanations. They were walking through a time capsule of destruction, preserved almost too well. Every shovel of dirt, every uncovered stone seemed to whisper the same terrifying truth. This wasn't the slow decline of an ordinary city. This was a moment of apocalypse, frozen in the ground. But if Tal El-Hammam really was Sodom, the question loomed. What kind of force could wipe out a city in such a sudden, catastrophic way? To understand why this discovery was so electrifying, we need to step back and revisit the ancient mystery of Sodom and Gomorrah itself. The ancient mystery. Long before archaeologists brushed away the ash at El-Hammam, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah was already carved into human memory. Whether you grew up reading the Bible or simply heard the tale in passing, you know its outline. Two cities consumed by wickedness, judged and destroyed by fire from the heavens. It's one of the most haunting moral parables ever written, echoing across Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The book of Genesis paints a vivid picture. The cities of the plain were infamous for corruption and depravity. God warns Abraham that judgment is coming, and only Lot and his family are given a chance to flee. Then comes the unforgettable climax, fire and brimstone raining down, leveling everything in sight. Lot's wife famously looks back and is turned into a pillar of salt, a detail that has fascinated and puzzled believers for centuries. For thousands of years, this account was less a matter of history and more a matter of faith. To theologians, it was evidence of divine justice. To skeptics, it was pure myth, a dramatic story meant to teach obedience and morality. After all, where was the proof? Cities don't just vanish without a trace, or do they? That question lingered for generations. Ancient writers outside the Bible also referenced the cities of the plain, suggesting that some great catastrophe left a mark deep enough to survive in collective memory. Greek historians spoke of scorched lands near the Dead Sea. Jewish historian Flavius Josephus hinted at ruins still visible in his own time. The desert itself, with its eerie salt formations and barren stretches, seemed to breathe with echoes of something lost. Still, without hard evidence, the tale remained more legend than fact. Archaeologists in the 19th and 20th centuries combed the area around the Dead Sea, but none could prove beyond doubt that the infamous cities had ever existed. Some believed the story was inspired by natural disasters like earthquakes, lightning storms, or volcanic eruptions. Others thought it was pure allegory, a metaphor for corruption and punishment rather than a historical event. And yet, the story never went away. It lived on in sermons, in art, in everyday language, Sodom and Gomorrah becoming shorthand for sin and ruin. Even people who never opened a Bible understood the meaning, a warning against excess, a reminder of divine wrath, and a chilling image of fire raining down from the sky. That's why when modern archaeologists stumbled upon the ruins at El-Hammam, the parallels set off alarms in minds both secular and religious. Could this be more than a story? Could the destruction described in Scripture actually be grounded in a real, historical catastrophe? For centuries, Sodom and Gomorrah had been trapped between the worlds of myth and faith. Now, with charred ruins in hand, archaeologists were starting to wonder if the line between those worlds was much thinner than anyone imagined. And if the Bible's story really drew from a real catastrophe, then the landscape itself should hold clues, strange traces in the desert that point to something extraordinary. Clues in the desert. If you've ever stood near the Dead Sea, you know it feels like another planet. The air hangs heavy with salt, the shoreline is jagged and strange, and the water is so thick with minerals that nothing can live in it. Travelers throughout history have described it as eerie, even cursed, and it's no wonder. The landscape seems to hold secrets buried just beneath the crust of salt and sand. For centuries, explorers and scholars suspected that if Sodom and Gomorrah had been real, they must have stood somewhere near this lifeless sea. After all, the book of Genesis refers to the cities of the plain, a cluster of settlements near fertile land that suddenly became wasteland. And what better candidate for a ruined, lifeless plain than the lowest, saltiest place on earth? The desert itself offers some tantalizing clues. Salt pillars dot the region, strange natural sculptures rising out of the ground like ghostly statues. One of these formations, tall and thin, is famously called Lot's wife. Locals point to it as the very spot where Lot's wife disobeyed the angel's warning, looked back at the destruction, and was frozen in salt. Whether by coincidence or providence, the image is unforgettable. Ancient historians left their own breadcrumbs. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century, claimed that the remains of the cities could still be seen in his time, burned into the earth around the Dead Sea. Earlier still, Greek and Roman travelers wrote about scorched lands nearby, places where the soil was cracked, blackened, and lifeless. Even if these weren't precise records, they suggest that something catastrophic happened here long before our time. Archaeologists noticed oddities too. Patches of soil near the northern Dead Sea were packed with strange mineral deposits. Some layers of ground looked almost as if they had been baked in a furnace. Mixed into the sediment were lumps of sulfur, the very brimstone that the Bible says rained down from heaven. These weren't proof in themselves, but they were enough to keep the legend alive in scientific circles. And then there's the silence of the region. Unlike other fertile valleys in the ancient Near East that saw city after city built, destroyed, and rebuilt, parts of the Dead Sea's eastern edge remained abandoned for centuries. Why would thriving towns suddenly vanish, never to return? What made people afraid or unable to resettle this land? Taken together, these clues painted a picture that was hard to ignore. The strange geography, the eerie salt pillars, the sulfur nodules, and the barren stretches of land all hinted at some long-ago catastrophe. People who passed down the story of Sodom and Gomorrah may not have known the science, but they knew the land had been scarred in a way that ordinary time couldn't explain. By the time archaeologists began digging seriously at Tal El-Hammam, the stage was already set. The desert had whispered its secrets for centuries. The only wonder was whether the ruins buried in its soil would finally reveal the truth. And when scientists began studying the destruction layer at Tal El-Hammam more closely, the whispers of legend gave way to something even more shocking: hard scientific evidence of a catastrophe beyond human imagination. The science behind the catastrophe. Once archaeologists uncovered the destruction layer at Tal El-Hammam, the next question was obvious. What on earth could have done this? Broken walls and burned houses could be explained by war or fire, but melted pottery, bricks fused together, ash and debris spread across miles, those were clues that demanded something much bigger. So, scientists began to test the evidence. Pottery fragments were placed under microscopes. What they found stunned them. The clay had been exposed to temperatures far higher than any city fire could ever reach. Some shards had partially liquefied, leaving a glass-like glaze on their surfaces. To melt clay like that, the heat would need to exceed 2,000 degrees Celsius, hotter than a volcanic eruption, hotter even than a military firestorm. Next came the soil samples. They contained tiny mineral crystals known as shocked quartz. These crystals only form under extreme pressure and heat, conditions seen in nuclear explosions or massive meteor impact. In other words, whatever struck Tal El-Hammam released more energy than any army could muster. And then there were the strange microscopic spherules scattered in the destruction layer. These were tiny glassy beads, formed when sand and rock are vaporized in an instant and then cool rapidly as they fall back to Earth. The last time researchers had seen similar beads was in sites like Tunguska in Siberia, where, in 1908, a cosmic object exploded in the atmosphere and flattened 80 million trees. Piece by piece, the evidence pointed towards something extraordinary: a cosmic airburst. That's when a comet or asteroid enters the atmosphere and detonates before hitting the ground, releasing a shock wave of fire and energy equal to several nuclear bombs. The Chelyabinsk event in 2013 was a modern reminder. It shattered windows across Russia, injuring over 1,000 people. And that one was relatively small. At Tal El-Hammam, scientists believe the airburst was massive. The fireball would have exploded just above the city, instantly igniting everything below. Temperatures soared. Roofs burst into flames. People were incinerated in a heartbeat. Shockwaves ripped through the walls, blasting them outward. Objects flew like shrapnel. In a single moment, the city was undone. It wasn't just the city that suffered. The fertile valley around Tall El-Hammam, once a hub of agriculture, was coated with a deadly layer of salt and ash. Crops would no longer grow. Fresh water sources may have been contaminated. Survivors, if any, would have faced starvation, disease, and displacement. No wonder the city was abandoned for centuries afterward. What makes this even more chilling is how closely it mirrors the biblical description. Genesis says fire rained down from the sky, destroying everything. That's exactly what a cosmic airburst would have looked like to those who witnessed it. Blinding light, a deafening roar, heat so intense it felt divine. To ancient eyes, there would have been no doubt it was judgment from above. The scientists who pieced this together didn't set out to prove the Bible right. They were following data, testing materials, comparing findings with known physical phenomena. Yet the results told a story that lined up eerily with one of the most famous tales of destruction ever written. And here's the most unsettling part. This wasn't just some ancient fluke. Cosmic airbursts still happen. They are rare, yes, but they are not gone. Earth still drifts through a universe filled with debris, and every once in a while something falls from the sky with terrifying consequences. But what did this apocalypse look like for the people who lived through it, if anyone actually survived at all? To answer that, we have to step into the terrifying aftermath. Ashes of a lost city. Picture it. One moment, a bustling city full of families, markets, and crop. The next, an instant of blinding light, a roaring shockwave, and everything is gone. Tall El-Hammam wasn't just destroyed, it was erased. For those caught in the blast, there was no time to react. The intense heat would have seared lungs before people could even scream. Bodies burned, houses exploded into flames, and walls crumbled outward as though struck by an invisible giant's fist. Survivors, if there were any, would have stumbled through a wasteland of fire, ash, and devastation. Archaeologists found evidence of just how sudden it all was. Skeletons were shattered, bones cracked and blackened, as if human lives had been frozen mid-disaster. Debris fields stretched across the ruins, objects tossed and mangled, testifying to the sheer violence of the event. It wasn't slow destruction. It was a city meeting its end in a single instant. And it wasn't just the people who suffered. The land itself was scarred beyond recognition. Soil samples reveal layers of ash and salt, spread across the once fertile valley like a poisonous blanket. This was farmland, the breadbasket of the region. Suddenly, it was barren. Crops wouldn't grow. Water sources may have turned brackish or undrinkable. With food gone and the ground itself cursed, rebuilding was impossible. What had once been a thriving hub of civilization became a wasteland. For centuries afterward, no one dared resettle. It was as though a collective memory of terror warned them away. This land is cursed. This land is deadly. Legends would have carried on, spoken in hushed tones, stories of fire that fell from the heavens and a city that paid the ultimate price. It's easy to imagine survivors spreading these tales as they fled to neighboring regions. Picture a refugee, burned and shaken, describing how the sky turned to fire, how the earth itself seemed to explode. For ancient listeners, the conclusion was obvious. This was divine punishment. The sins of Sodom had called down the wrath of heaven. Over time, that raw memory would crystallize into the story we know today, one of sin, fire, and judgment. And whether you take it as literal divine action or as human testimony of a natural catastrophe, the result is the same. A terrifying warning etched into history. The ruins of Tall El-Hammam don't just tell us about destruction, they tell us about trauma. An entire culture wiped out, a fertile valley turned into desolation, and a story so shocking it would echo for thousands of years. Modern warnings. It's tempting to think of what happened at Tall El-Hammam as ancient history, a disaster locked safely in the past. But the truth is far more unsettling. Cosmic airbursts are not gone. They are rare, yes, but they remain a very real threat. In 1908, A massive explosion flattened 800 square miles of forest in Tunguska, Siberia. Scientists believe it was caused by a meteor that exploded mid-air with the force of thousands of atomic bombs. Thankfully, it struck a remote area. If it had happened over a city, the devastation would have mirrored what archaeologists uncovered at El-Hammam. More recently, in 2013, a much smaller object entered Earth's atmosphere over Chelyabinsk, Russia. It exploded in the sky with the power of 30 Hiroshima bombs, shattering windows, damaging buildings, and injuring more than 1,000 people. And that was just a small rock. NASA and other space agencies now track near-Earth objects constantly, cataloging asteroids and comets that could one day cross our path. The good news? Most are harmless. The bad news? We don't always see them coming. Chelyabinsk took everyone by surprise. The story of Sodom, whether you see it as divine judgment or natural disaster, carries a warning we shouldn't ignore. In a single moment, an entire city was wiped away, and it could happen again. The thing is, not if Earth will be struck again by a cosmic blast. The question is when, and whether we'll be ready when the sky itself turns into fire. The ruins of El-Hammam remind us that legends often hide terrifying truths. For more deep dives into history's mysteries, don't forget to hit subscribe and stay tuned.